Saturday, everyone. I am Ursula Sandromino, Associate Dean at the School of Diplomacy and International Relations. So again, a warm welcome. I know we have a very large audience joining us virtually. So welcome to those in person, welcome to those who are joining us virtually. And just a few quick notes. We appreciate those of you who got up very, very early this morning to be with us. So please help yourself to lunch and feel free to enjoy it at any point during the presentation today. We will probably be here till around 3 p.m. So let's get started. I would like to start with our Dean, Dean Courtney Smith. And you will also meet our faculty, you will meet students, you'll hear about internships, you'll hear about our 3 majors. So we're really excited to share it all with you. And Dean Smith.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us today at Seton Hall in the School of Diplomacy. What I'd like to do is begin with a slide that just kind of gives you an overview of some of the key themes we're going to focus on over the next few hours. What I'd like to do is highlight what the School of Diplomacy is going to offer to you and how we're going to help you take the next steps in where you want to go in your careers. And what I'd like to talk about first is that a lot of you as prospective students were probably like some of us in high school, really interested and passionate about international affairs. And what we want to do at the School of Diplomacy is take that interest and passion and give you the knowledge and skills you need to apply that in your future careers. We're going to do that inside the classroom and outside the classroom, and that's what we're going to try and show you today, how you're going to do that learning in and out of the classroom that's going to give you those knowledge and skills so you can make a difference in your future careers. Seton Hall is about training servant leaders, people who want to go out and make their local communities, the nation, the world a better place, and in order to do that, you need to take the right steps, and our program's designed to help you do that. The couple of highlights about it is we have a great location for studying international affairs. And I want to highlight what I mean, 2 things about our location. First is where Seton Hall is located. We are located 14 miles from the center of international diplomacy, the United Nations, New York City, and everything that it has to offer. You walk about 10 minutes down the street, you hop on a train, and you're in Midtown Manhattan in 30 minutes. That's a huge resource for our students. It allows them to go in and do internships that you'll hear about in a few minutes. It allows them to go and do cultural activities, to go hear lectures and things like that. So it's a tremendous resource to be close to the UN. And it also allows us not only to send our students to New York, but also to bring New York out to us. We have adjuncts who have experience, professors of practice, people who are actually working in the field and teaching with us at the same time because of our proximity. So in addition to New York, we also have a program in Washington, D.C. that you'll hear about. This is a program that allows you to spend a semester in Washington taking School of Diplomacy classes and doing a professional internship. And because everything is offered by the school, by Seton Hall and the School of Diplomacy, you might as well have been on campus. Your scholarships apply, your financial aid, you stay right on track to graduation. So if you're looking for a program where you can do New York and DC, you can do them both here. And we'll be very excited to work with you on that. The other thing I want to highlight about our location is the benefits of being at Seton Hall, but in the School of Diplomacy at the same time. In Seton Hall, you have everything you could want in a major university, 10,000 students, 130 student organizations, basketball in the Big East Conference. If you were up late last night like me watching the game, it was not an easy experience last night against TCU. I promise it's not always that painful to watch Seton Hall basketball. But the good news is our women's team is still in the women's NIT, and they play again on Monday night. So we're looking forward to that. But you get everything you could want from a major university. But in the School of Diplomacy, you have a very intimate community. We have 300 undergraduate students. We have 150 graduate students. We're a separate school or college at the university, which gives us an identity. So we have really a diplomacy community or family feel to the school. So you can have very close-knit relationships with your peers, with your professors, but have everything you'd want at Seton Hall. So in addition to our location, we're going to give you great academic programs. I mentioned your learning, the skills and knowledge we're going to give you are going to be in the classroom and out of the classroom. So in the classroom, you're going to have 3 different degree programs to choose from. We'll go through each one in detail in a few minutes, but basically one is a traditional 4-year degree in diplomacy and international relations. It gives you a lot of flexibility to earn second majors, minors, and things like that to customize your studies. The second option is a 5-year program, which is our undergraduate degree and our master's degree. That would usually take 6 years. If you do it in an accelerated way, you can get both degrees in 5 years. And so that would be how you're enhancing your portfolio, by getting that graduate degree. Your last option is to do a 3+3 with the Seton Hall Law School. So an undergraduate degree with us and a law degree, that would usually be 7 years separately, but we call it a 3+3 because you can do it in 6. You do 3 years here on the main campus through your junior year. What would be your senior year is your 1L, your first year at law school, and at the end of that, that's the rest of your credits you need for your undergraduate degree, and in just 2 more years, you'll have your law degree. So we'll go over those in more detail. The key thing is that we're trying to build curriculums for you that allow you to get the knowledge and skills that are right for the career that you want to have, to get the right credentials to get you on your way. And the key thing about all of these programs is that they are all based on small class sizes. And I just really want to stress that. All of the courses you'll see when we go through those curricula are capped at 30 students or fewer. Okay, and I just don't mean like the upper class, things you take as like a junior or senior. I mean, every class you're going to take throughout your studies are going to be that way. So it's the faculty that you'll get to meet in a few minutes, you'll have very close relationships with them because of the small class size. They are faculty members here and in our program because they want those small classes too. They want that kind of relationship. So we'll go into more detail in the programs. But speaking of these programs, who's going to guide you through them? That's going to be our faculty, and you're going to meet a few of them in just a minute. But what I want to highlight of our faculty, and when you hear from them, just keep 3 things in mind. The first thing is that our faculty are excellent and dedicated teachers. Okay, the university has what's called a Teacher of the Year award, where they pick the best teacher on campus from all of the different schools and colleges. They've had that award for 6 or 8 years, and our faculty, school diplomacy faculty, have won that award 3 times at the university level. That's almost half the time, and we've got 16 of the university's 400 faculty. So we're really punching above our weight in terms of the quality of teaching that our faculty have. Second thing I'll highlight about our faculty that you'll see is that they are excellent researchers that not only put that research in outstanding publications, but they also have a very policy focus to that research. Okay, and you'll see that when they speak. The last thing is that our faculty are very much engaged in research with students. And again, you'll get examples of that. So you'll really see the opportunities to work with students, whether it be through our Diplo lab that you'll hear about, our professors writing books and different things like that. Keep in mind for that, because that's very important to us here at the School of Diplomacy. And why is it very important to have a great contact between students and faculty? That's because we also have outstanding students. I know I'm in the admissions building. We're supposed to be talking about, how great all the programs are at Seton Hall. Our students are the best. Okay, I'm just going to say it. Our students are the best on campus. Okay, and because of that, they are very sought after. I constantly am approached by faculty members in other programs saying, "I love diplomacy students in our classes." I'm like, "We love them too." Our students are great. And when we talk about our students, and when you hear from them in a few minutes, two things. Not only are they academic really, really strong, but they're outstanding leaders on our campus, and you'll see examples of that. So, yes. So that's the overview. Now we're going to go into more detail on each of these areas. So we're going to start with our faculty. And so what I'd like to do is introduce the chair of our faculty. That's Dr. Martin Edwards. And as he's coming up, because Dr. Edwards won't brag about himself, I'm going to brag about him while he's walking up. Dr. Edwards is a specialist on international institutions, in particular the international monetary institutions like the IMF, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank. And his book on the IMF and the World Trade Organization highlights a lot of the things I was just talking about. Very policy relevant. It is, he's presented the results of his research on the IMF and the World Trade Organization to the staffs of both of those organizations. I just think that's incredibly cool. And on top of that, he wrote the book with the help of 16 different students along the way. So it highlights two of the themes. So Dr. Edwards, please come on up.
Good morning. It's a beautiful day at Seton Hall. It's a great day for diplomacy. And you might think, well, why? I mean, you look at the news and it's really depressing, which it is. But I think for us as faculty, we kind of look on this as an opportunity for us to dig in a little harder and explain to people, why what's going on in the world matters directly to them. I've been tremendously proud of all of the faculty that's done media outreach about Ukraine in the last couple of weeks. One of my colleagues was on National Public Radio. So I had folks from back home. I grew up in Michigan, Big Bend. It's shaped like a, never mind. You can't do it with New Jersey, And folks emailed me and said, hey, do you work with that person? I said, why, yes, I do. So Dean Smith gave a sort of a generous introduction about the faculty and about their quality. And I'm also going to say this. Dean Smith talked about how many teachers of the year that we have. We're not done winning awards, because the awards that are coming for this year, diplomacy will be extensively represented. So this tells you one thing. You're going to have a quality educational experience taught by folks that are exceptional in the classroom and take their work seriously. So we asked a little bit about how students can kind of connect to faculty, and that's sort of based on how the school is organized. We're organized into a series of research centers. So we have one research center that looks at conflict and security. That's been tremendously active on the Ukraine. We have one research center that looks at the UN and global governance. We have one on foreign policy studies. We have one on public health. These are places for students to kind of, again, connect with faculty. It's fundamentally important. The whole point of going to a small college is to be able to connect with people and to form those relationships that are going to sort of benefit you in all of the rest of your days. I've been here since 2006. I still hear from students in my first class from 2006. Okay, now they all have jobs, right? Okay, so, but they're all talking about their second job, or they're sending me pictures of their kids, or they're inviting me to their weddings, right? This is why we're in this business. This is why we do what we do. So, where am I going next, ma'am? Okay. All right. So thank you. So our curriculum is broken up much like the U.S. State Department. So what we have is we have of our 16 faculty members, each specializes in at least one of these areas. So be it foreign policy, or myself, I'm sort of one of these hybrid folks. I do work on the IMF and the WTO, so that's obviously an international organization, but those are obviously economic institutions. So some of us kind of bridge these, and of course we have functional interests as well, right? So what we try to do is, of course, cover the globe. And in so doing, that means, when we think about our curriculum planning is always centered around the idea of making sure that we offer all of the classes, in these areas that we need. Okay. I'm now waiting for the director. Wonderful. Okay, great. So what we want to do, obviously, the key for me is to hand off the ball as quickly as possible and actually get these faculty that I've talked up in front of you. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Yansheng Wang. Dr. Wang is our Director of Undergraduate Studies. He is the author of a book on China's environmental crises that came out last year to critical acclaim, and he is a fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. So, Dr. Wang? You could say a few words.
Well, now you see my face, right? So I don't need to take off my mask, right? Actually, I was thinking whether I should explain why I'm still having the mask on. But now still, some of you still wearing the mask. I don't, but I can't explain why. I'm expecting to have international travel in the coming. I don't know what kind of requirements they're gonna have. Certainly. When you get infected, they might not allow you to travel. So you see, this is the problem I actually want to address, right? The problem of global health studies. We want to examine health issues from a foreign policy, governance, national security perspective, and that travel restriction measures indeed actually is part of our study because. You see, if you look at how many countries, they all have, well, now they most are lifting those travel requirements, but when the pandemic started, almost every country rushed, to institute all those travel restriction measures. Even though, you have international health regulation, this is the governance mechanism, to all institutions or international norms that want to govern pandemics, global health emergencies. It made it very clear, Article 43, Article 44, to say when you institute these measures, you should not supposed to disrupt trade and travel, but no country listened, and now, even though many countries are lifting, those measures, still you have other countries even tighten those travel restriction measures. Extreme example would be China. You might say it's crazy, but still they're requiring everybody traveling into the country to undergo 21 days of forced quarantine. But it's forced, not the home quarantine. It's quarantine at a designated place out of your own pocket. You have to pay for that 21 days. I just spoke to a journalist friend the other day. She worked for a newspaper in Hong Kong. So she went to Shanghai only to find herself quarantined there for 21 days. So after she finished her quarantine, she went to Shenyang in northeastern China. There she was again under the quarantine for 28 days, plus 28 days of home quarantine. So you see, this is how sometimes you have this chaotic, uncoordinated travel restriction requirements that are actually not just hurting tourism, airline industries, but also prevent the normal movement of the people, and in a way make it difficult, to for the people, to exchange their ideas, views. See how now this is contributing, to this emergence of two sets of perceptions, value systems, and in a way norms, here, we believe in this liberal rules-based international order. But there, it seems that you find a country, that believes you need to accommodate us, not that we accommodated international rules. So I published a piece in Washington Post last month before the Olympic Games, basically talk about how this COVID-19 pandemic actually contributed to the closing of China in a way. But anyway, that is just to give you an example how this is actually, I think, extremely exciting field to study, because you could have public health experts, epidemiologists, medical doctors. Well, they have their view on public health issues. But if you look at this pandemic, it's very clear, Many of these issues have to be solved at the political level, That why China is cling to that so-called zero COVID strategy, because they don't want to accept any risks, of the country's healthcare system overwhelmed by, a surge of cases, But we know, right, that any public policy, you have to learn to accept certain risks, right? So, this is just an example how politics, right, the international relations have a very important role to play, right, in the even in global health related decision making. So today, I don't need to introduce myself since our chair has already introduced me, but safe to say, I teach global health issues. I also teach courses on China. One of the courses I offered at the undergraduate is U.S.-China relations. Certainly that's becoming more interesting. In a way, I found it, unfortunate, that these two countries seems to be really heading in the direction of confrontation, no cooperation. And then we just published a report in January, talking about how the U.S. and China could cooperate a lot of issues in global health, but that is not happening. In fact, so far, when we're talking about dealing with a common threat, there is no serious discussion between the two countries that could have leveraged their size, their significance, right, in coping with, this major global challenge. That's just so unfortunate. Again, so this is another example of how the bilateral relationship have an impact on global health, right? So we have a Center for Global Health Studies. We also publish a journal, Global Health Governance. We encourage students to participate in the activities of the journal's publication and the center's activities. But now I remember I still have I could do a 5-minute presentation before I introduce Professor Emery. So I'm going to talk about China's COVID vaccine diplomacy, right? That was launched essentially in March 2020 when China emerged from the COVID outbreak, as an early winner, right? So it basically took advantage of status as a leading exporter of masks, and later the vaccines to export those medical supplies, desperately needed medical supplies to other countries. So by essentially March, March 2021, China emerged as the leading supply of COVID vaccines, right? And they started to use the vaccines to promote foreign policy goals. That is the definition for vaccine diplomacy, which actually the government officials, diplomats hate this term vaccine diplomacy because they indicate they're not that altruistic. Right? Basically, this is the branch of global health diplomacy that relies on the use or delivery of vaccines. Next slide. So what do they want to achieve? They want to showcase their technological prowess, their global health leadership. Just last month, I published a special report titled The COVID-19 Pandemic in China's Global Health Leadership, which basically gave an assessment, how successful of that strategy, of that vaccine diplomacy. So if you have a chance, feel free to download a copy from online. Secondly, they want to present the image of a responsible great power, according to General Chen Wei, who was the leading developer of the Chinese vaccines. Well, she is a general because she worked for that AMS, Academy of Military Medical Sciences, sort of like the U.S. U.S. Armory, right? The developing. Well, you know how this is now being subject to disinformation, by Russia and China. The U.S. is making biological weapons in Ukraine. That's total war. Well, again, what it shows, we have a course actually that talk about global health security, and we're going to teach you actually why this is totally baseless. It's impossible, right? So another reason, maybe you want to be interested in global health issues. So according to General Chen Wei, the successful entry to clinical trials of vaccines with independent intellectual property rights is embodiment of China's science technological progress, embodiment of China's great power, image, and responsibility, and even more contribution to humankind. So later she became awarded a national hero in China. But ironically, the vaccine she developed was the least popular in China. Nobody was using that vaccine. So I asked that question of the Chinese social media. Said, "Where is her vaccine? Nobody is using it." And she's awarded national hero. They also want to expand the market share for their vaccine products. In fact, Sinovac, two of the leading vaccine makers, making fat profit by sending vaccines overseas. By January 2022, they already sent 1.8 billion doses of vaccines overseas. They also have geopolitical considerations, in addition to the commercial incentives. They want to cement China's geopolitical ties to those countries they consider strategically important, such as Southeast Asia, for example. For a time, more than 40% of Chinese vaccine was sent to Southeast Asia. Right? Indonesia, Professor Murphy is the leading authority in Southeast Asia, can tell you that for a time, 85% of Indonesian vaccines are actually come from China. So next slide. So we don't have time to cover all this. Basically, we want to find out how successful, right, or what China is doing, right? They have, and some of their claims certainly are not true. For example, when China say we want to send the vaccines, as a global public good. By global public good, we know it's non-rivalrous, it's not excludable, right? Just like air, right? It's supposed to be provided for everybody. Right? But roughly 93% of the Chinese vaccines actually are being distributed as commercial sales. It's for sale. It's not provided for free, right? And just 7% of the Chinese vaccines are being distributed as donations. In the U.S., we know, right, almost all 100% vaccines are sent as donations. You see the difference between the two. Well, I'm not going to let's go to the next slide, because for the sake of time. We'll talk about geopolitical incentives, because you may have heard, right, the Belt and Road Initiative in China. That is China's signature foreign policy initiative in the 21st century, right? So they also, through this vaccine diplomacy, they want to prioritize those countries that participate in China's Belt and Road Initiative, right, to expand Chinese influence. So this figure shows more than 90% of those BRI participants, or Belt and Road Initiative participants, actually are receiving a Chinese vaccine. So clearly, right, there's incentive, right, to use the vaccine to promote Chinese geopolitical influence. Next. And that is different from the United States. We emphasize the donations as no strings attached, but we've been very slow, right, to sell the vaccines, especially in Southeast Asia. Right? They like the U.S. vaccines, but they have to accept the Chinese one because their delivery is much more efficient. Right? We have been trying to build this so-called Quad partnership, including the United States, Australia, India, and Japan, basically to counter Chinese influence, aiming to provide 1 billion doses to the Indo-Pacific, especially Southeast Asia, in 2022. And now, really, I don't know what's the status of that initiative. Supposedly, with the situation like under control in the United States, you can send more vaccines there. But the actual situation might be very different. Now, my understanding is that with the Ukraine crisis, the interest right now is moving elsewhere. Okay, and then look at the Chinese vaccine diplomacy. Interestingly, with the arrival of the Omicron wave, next slides. This shows the amount of the delivery of Chinese vaccines worldwide, because each of these colors represents one country. So that is started from December 2020. This is the most recent, right? To March 2022, right? You see, it peaked at what time? October 2021, right? This is when the Chinese vaccine diplomacy is like this golden era, right? Golden days of Chinese vaccine diplomacy, right? But this is precisely when the fall of 2021, we saw the arrival of the highly transmissible, right? Delta, then Omicron variant. And we know that Chinese vaccines are not effective, right, against preventing infections of these highly transmissible variants. Right? This new real-world examples now suggest that 2 doses of Sinovac vaccines only have efficacy rate of 1% in preventing new infections. 3 doses, 8%. That's essentially useless, right? But for comparison, 2 doses of Pfizer vaccine is also not effective. In Hong Kong, it's 1%. Right? But with 3 doses, it becomes 77%. So I think that might explain why the Chinese vaccine became less popular, right, in the world. Right? See, actually, after October, when the peak, you see this dramatic drop, right, of the delivery of the Chinese vaccines, and now it's almost 0. That's the end of Chinese vaccine diplomacy. I tweeted and said, "This is the end of the Chinese vaccine diplomacy." I'm sure they're not happy to hear that, but you see, sometimes how developments in the biological world, right, can change the trajectory in the political and diplomacy field, right? So I guess that's it. Thank you. Introduce a very important member of our faculty, Dr. Emery Murphy. She joined the School of Diplomacy in 2004. She's also a senior research scholar at the Weatherhead East Asia Institute at Columbia University. And she is also a founding partner of the New York Southeast Asia Network. In the 2019-2020 ASEAN Research Program Fulbright Scholar. She wears multiple hats. Dr. Murphy's research interests include international relations in Asia, political development in Southeast Asia, U.S. foreign policy toward Southeast Asia, and the rise of international security issues. She is co-author and co-editor of 2 books. One is non-traditional security issues in Southeast Asia. The other is legacies of engagement in Southeast Asia. Her articles have appeared in many journals, including Asia Security, Orbis, Asia Policy, World Policy Review, and PX. She has received research awards from the Smith Richardson Foundation, National Asia Research Program, the Social Science Research Council, and the U.S. Fulbright Program. So, Dr. Murphy.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out today. I know it's a gorgeous day, and after all of the bad weather we've had, I'm sure many of you would like to be outside, taking a jog, going to the park, what have you. So we're delighted that you're here with us today. As has been told by both my colleague Yang Huang and Martin Edwards, I teach foreign policy analysis here at the school. I've been here almost 20 years. I was hired to create a specialization in foreign policy analysis at the graduate level. At the undergrad level, I teach a class on comparative foreign policy, and I'm delighted to see quite a number of current and former students in the class. And what I thought I would do today is give you a little bit of a taste of how we study foreign policy in the classroom. So let me just ask our graduate assistant Race to give me the next slide, please. So at the undergraduate level, I teach a course on comparative foreign policy. And some of you may ask, well, gee, what the heck is foreign policy? All right. So foreign policy is the method by which states pursue their national interest in the international realm. So they're actions taken by states to influence other actors, the UN, other states, INGOs, to pursue their national interests. National interests might be security, right? How do you make the US or the regional environment safer, more secure? It might involve economic interests. How do we make our country more prosperous and raise the standards of living, both for Americans at home and for others abroad? The other goals might be, how do we promote our values? If we believe in human rights and the sanctity of human life, how do we go about trying to promote those values and hold leaders who violate them accountable, okay? So those are just some of the national interests that the US and other states pursue. So in this class, what we do is we come back to this question of how do states define and pursue their interests in a number of ways. We study key cases, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Obviously, we've watched the horror of Russia's invasion of the Ukraine take place right in front of our eyes. So I will make reference to that. I have revised the syllabus extensively this semester to be able to incorporate that, because, you know, being a good foreign policy analyst requires you to put yourself in the position of your negotiating partner, of your adversary, of that leader or group of people that you are trying to influence. And when we use historical cases like the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is the closest the US has ever come, or the world has ever come to nuclear annihilation, we know how it ended, right? So even though we try really hard to use our theories and concepts and apply them to the case, because we know how it ended, there is always a tendency to assume, oh, of course, John F. Kennedy and Nikolaus Khrushchev were going to find a way to avoid nuclear war. But that wasn't the case. We came very close. And so being able this semester to use the unfolding case of Russia's aggression and war against Ukraine has been something utterly awful, right, for the people of Ukraine. But at least we have used it for the purpose of applying our concepts and theories. So with that as a little background, let me just say that the goal of foreign policy analysis is explanation, analysis, and prediction. A lot of the theories that we use in foreign policy are patterns of the past, okay? So we look back on different wars or in different cases where leaders like John F. Kennedy and Khrushchev were able to avoid war to say, what patterns do we see? What lessons can we learn? How can we attempt to use those patterns or theories to help us understand where we are today in the present and to predict the future? Because if we look at specific historical patterns and they're leading to a negative outcome in the future, then that means that policymakers can attempt in the present today to take steps to mitigate those possible negative eventualities. So for example, my colleague Yang Wang just mentioned, and I'm sure those of you who read the papers know, that the US and China are engaged in a lot of competition, right? And so one of the top scholars in the field, Allison, has gone back and looked at 500 years of cases where you had rising powers like China and existing powers like the United States, and said, gee, in these cases of great power transition, how many of them have been resolved peacefully? And how many of them have led to great power world wars? And he finds that in 16 of the 20 cases, you've ended up in world wars. So that is a pattern of history that has led to a whole subset of theories about great power transition and what factors can lead to more peaceful outcomes, what factors can lead to more conflictual outcomes. And then our job as foreign policy analysts is to say, if 15 of the 20 cases lead to conflict, that's not where we want to go. So what possible remedies might there be there for foreign policy analysts and foreign policy makers in the future to try to mitigate that? Okay, so may I have the next slide, please? So in our in the class on comparative foreign policy, the first thing we start out with is, well, how do we characterize the international environment, right? Because foreign policy is made by leaders of different states, but they do so in an international environment, right? And how do we characterize that international environment? What are the driving forces? And many of the theories would say, gee, we need to look at worldviews, and worldviews are just integrated set of assumptions about how the world works, right? And one fact that we know is that the international environment is anarchic. That just means there's no world government, okay? That's a fact. But then we have two key theories. One is realism, one is liberalism. Some of you might have studied these in some history classes. And realists say, gee, the fact that there is anarchy means, and there's no world government, means that states are the key actors. And the international environment is extremely competitive. It's zero sum. Because there's no government to protect us like the police do, and there's no law like there is in domestic politics, then security is always the number one interest, because there's nobody else to protect you. So states are worried about survival. It's a very competitive, threat-based environment. Cooperation is difficult, etc. So the key national interest that states are going to pursue is security. An alternative worldview is liberalism. Liberals would agree with realists, hey, of course there's no world government, right? That's a fact. But that doesn't mean that security is at risk. Look at the United States. We're protected by two big oceans on either side. We have smaller states, Canada and the US, on either side. Security for many countries, at least in North America as well as South America, is not at stake. Therefore, states can pursue other interests. They can cooperate. They can work together to create functional equivalence at the international level, right? We have a World Trade Organization that helps regulate international trade, that in turn helps make us more prosperous, okay? We can create a UN to help regulate peace and security. And we can focus on other actors, such as international organizations, multinational corporations that play key roles, okay? So there's much more scope for cooperation, etc., under a liberal worldview. Another worldview might say, hey, states aren't the key actors, IOs aren't the key actors. You know what? Tribes. People buy into different collective identities. They may be ethnic, they may be religious, but focusing on states means that these other worldviews don't take in and don't focus on factors like Islamic terrorism, okay, that then creates conflict, 9/11, etc. And so they would argue that we need to look at different groups and identity politics. And so the point is that we start out in our class with these different models. Why? Because they filter in information, and when people in positions of leadership, it states, operate according to these, you get very different foreign policies. So how does this help us understand Ukraine and Russia? Okay, many people argue, gee, what do you think? Russia, Putin, they very liberal, or are they much more realist? Okay, obviously they have a much more realist perspective. We've heard Putin and Russia say, hey, you know why there's conflict? Because NATO expanded in so many of the former Eastern European states and parts of the former Soviet Union. Therefore, they helped create this conflict and raise tensions in the region. Even some American scholars say, you know, sure, bring a lot of the former Eastern European countries in. And too many Americans would say, what? We just wanted to enhance prosperity, enhance cooperation with these states that were formerly under much more aggressive rule under the Soviet Union. This expansion of the EU, of NATO, was to promote democracy, bind countries together. This was all for the good. And so we can see these two different interpretations, right? But even some American scholars would say, well, but if we go back 10 years or so, American and Western scholars perhaps should have said, if we expand NATO to Russia's doorstep, and we know that Russians tend to have a realist perspective, then how are they going to interpret this action? Okay? If they're going to view this as a threat, then how might they respond? And so it's just one of these points where having different policymakers wearing different worldviews and interpreting actions and acting upon them can lead to conflict. And some might have said, well, maybe EU membership, but not NATO, okay? That might have reduced threat perceptions and kept things under wraps. From a worldview, from a tribalism perspective, I think we all know, right, that Ukraine has a substantial minority of Russian-speaking people, that the Ukrainian population is divided in terms of kind of Orthodox religion and Catholicism, and so that you have different perspectives among the people of Ukraine. And we've certainly heard Putin, right, say that Russia had to go in and liberate the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians and the Russians are one people, okay? So this is how we start out a class in comparative foreign policy, thinking about different worldviews, who holds them, and what that means for the operating system. May I have the next slide, please? So after that in the class, we would then go through and do a lot of other kinds of factors. What factors at the international level of analysis drive foreign policy? All right, so we can think of the importance of alliance and international organizations. When we think about the current case at hand, we see NATO, right, taking huge actions to help support the Ukrainians, even though Ukraine is not a member, will not be a member, but it is under threat. We also see partnerships, right? What does it mean that China and Russia signed an agreement, right, when Putin goes to Beijing during the Olympics, and they say that they are crafting a partnership for the 21st century? Is China going to support Russia in this? They've tried to kind of bridge it. Some say, gee, they might not. Very unclear, but you certainly saw Biden, right, having a 2-hour talk with Xi Jinping yesterday, trying to ensure that China does not support Russia, trying to make the argument to China, you're a rising power, you're an economically globalized power. You have an interest in international stability. Russia's a disruptor in the international system. You don't want a system and a globalization that comes apart. That is not in your interest. So we see these things playing out. I realize that time is short, but we then look at a whole series of factors that influence foreign policy on the domestic level. In democracies, leaders are constrained by their constituents, by checks and balances. President Biden can't commit resources to Ukraine and NATO. He needs Congress, right? Which has the power of the purse to support his moves, to vote for them, as we've seen Congress do. We also need public support of the American public, which at this rate is about 60% in favor, 70 depending on which poll you view, of support for the Ukraine. Over the long term, democracies are constrained by their public's views on whether or not they will support and pay for conflicts. How that all works out as gas prices rise, we're unclear. Clearly, what we've seen in Putin's Russia is that this is not the case in an authoritarian system. He has taken this move pretty much on his own, suppressed protesters, suppressed the press, right? So real information about the crisis is not getting out in most of the mainstream media, in order to pursue his own minority interest and use state-owned TV to kind of inoculate his public only with the views he wants them to have. Whether he can continue this in an age of social media remains to be clear. And then finally, we study different issues at the individual level. Putin, as you all know, is a former KGB agent who once said that the breakup of the Soviet Union was the worst catastrophe of the 20th century, and he has made it a mission to try to put it back together again, okay? So I just want to flag, this is some of the stuff that we do in comparative foreign policy. We start out with a lot of theories. We then look at interesting cases. And then in the second half of the class, we do some simulations and we apply them to key cases. So we study foreign policies of Russia, China, Japan, Germany, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of give everybody an introduction, both theoretically and empirically, to the study. So I'm going to stop there. I will just say that most of the students in the comparative foreign policy class are freshmen, and I hope to see quite a number of you in my class next semester. I have 2 children who are or have been in college, so parents out there, I know that this is a very momentous decision for you as well, and I'm happy to chat later. Thank you. And now, it is my great pleasure to announce the newest member of the diplomacy faculty, Dr. Joseph Huddelson. But as you will hear in a moment, since he has arrived on campus, Dr. Huddelson has had a huge impact. He has created what we call the Diplo Lab as a forum to do research with undergraduate students. He has worked with our other colleague, David Wood, on some fascinating research on conflict in the Middle East and elsewhere. He has edited 2 books, and he is a superstar.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. So I'm just going to introduce myself and then talk a little bit about what the Diplo Lab is, how it works, and the kinds of opportunities it creates, as well as what the students who go through the Diplo Lab, what they wind up doing. So just to briefly introduce myself, I joined the school in 2018, right after I finished my PhD at University of Southern California in international security. My research interests are mostly on self-determination movements, separatist and secessionist groups. That might be unfamiliar terms to some people, but basically when a part of a country wants to break away and create its own country, very often that's a recipe for violent conflict, right? But I actually don't study the violent part, though. I study how they use diplomacy as part of that that effort, right? And an interesting thing that comes up, since we're all considering the School of Diplomacy right now, is that diplomacy is one practice that can either replace conflict and be an alternative to violence when you have groups that are struggling to get something that they want, or it can actually exacerbate conflict. It can invite weapons to flow into conflict zones. It can make things much worse, right? So in this space, diplomacy and separatist groups, it's always a puzzle how these groups are using diplomacy to either fight more efficiently or try to stop fighting altogether, right? I also study war economy issues in protracted conflict areas, as well as how this very ethereal concept of legitimacy works and moves and changes in places where there's conflicts, right? Some of these places you have, a dozen different actors claiming some authority of the state, and they're competing for public support, right? So issues on how public opinion and how what we might call civilian investment in these different authorities. This is a very hard package of questions to answer, especially in a very chaotic place that is anywhere where you have ongoing conflict. So my teaching largely follows my research interests. I teach classes at the undergraduate and graduate levels on international security. I have a course on terrorism, and I also teach our research methods sequence, right? So if there was a single reason I was hired to join, it was probably would be that to sort of guide students through the process of learning how to do rigorous research and have high standards of evidence, because it's not natural, or it's not intuitive, right? How to construct a good research design that will give you strong conclusions. Closely related to what Dr. Murphy was just talking about with foreign policy analysis, right? So I can go to the next slide, yeah. So as part of this package overlap of interests, I came here and recognized one thing right away, which was to echo something Dean Smith said earlier. Diplomacy students are extraordinarily talented, right? And I came here and said, I have all these students around me itching to get involved in research, right? Clearly they have writing talent. Clearly they have talent of critical thinking, right? How can we come up with something that enables students and fosters this talent? So with the support of many in the school, I founded this thing called the Diplomacy Lab, which is now just called Diplo Lab. And what we do is every year we recruit 3 or 4 students to come on and join faculty research projects, as well as start some of their own projects. I actually have a few Diplo Lab students in here today, so you can ask around for them to hear about that student experience. We have had a great success record. We have published 3 times in Foreign Policy, which is I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Published once in Foreign Policy as 3 separate articles. We also published in Washington Post and a political violence professional blog called Political Violence at a Glance. This is overlapping with some of my personal work and then some of the work I do with Professor Wood and the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies. So the practice of DiploLab is training students in research and practicing alongside them, right? There's something that is not often said about your faculty, which is that just because we have the title doctor and professor, that doesn't mean we stopped being students, right? The process of doing research, right, a commitment to good research methods means the humility, taking on the humility of being a student, and openness to being wrong, and having a theory and looking for evidence and having the evidence actually cut against what you believed about it and accept that and explain it, right? So this setup lets us practice being a student alongside our students, right, as we practice this process of trying to do rigorous research. Not quite yet. Oh, I did want to point out, so our students have been tremendously successful, right? In the last 2 months, I've gotten word from our 2 most recent graduates. One was offered a job with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a think tank in Washington, D.C. They usually only hire master's students, but her writing record was so extraordinary, they said, we want to hire you. And then I just heard from another student was offered a job at State Department, right? Straight out of an undergraduate degree. So these skills really work, right? They really serve the students as they continue to move on. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So I just talk for a second about some of the projects we're working on right now. We actually do have 2 writing projects going on the Ukraine conflict. One's focusing on how kind of transparency that social media and the internet have brought on have sort of put Ukraine and especially the President Zelensky in this with this unique set of tools that have been used in an extraordinary way that we haven't seen very often. And then the second has to do with the track record of how any violation we see of international standards in Russia already has a precedent somewhere, whether it's the U.S. invasion of Iraq against the advice of many UN members, or whether it's the recognition of Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara, right, which was a recognition of conquest, right, of territory won through conquest, right. Everything that gets under our skin about seeing what's happening in Ukraine has happened before somewhere else, right? These moments have happened. So we're working on a paper that sort of develops a timeline of how we've eroded some of these principles of international relations. We've been, the students and I have been collecting original data on self-determination diplomacy. In a second, I'll have a map for you that sort of visualizes some of our data. That's been a very long project. We're very nearly wrapped up, which is really great. And then we also have smaller parts, interview transcription. We do some survey analysis, and we try to create as many writing projects out of all of these that we can, because I believe that the greatest skill set diplomacy students can leave with is a strong writing record, right? And good analytical writing, and hopefully some articles published in public-facing places that they can point to and to prospective employers and say, here's what I've worked at. Again, that student who was hired by the CSIS, they said this is what got her that job, right? Because she had published so many things, both with me, and then she went on her own to do it. So you can go to the next slide. Right, so this is one of the fruits of our labors. This is a image from a paper I have working on right now. What you're seeing is a heat map of diplomacy by the government of Western Sahara, which I don't have my laser pointer, but well, maybe people can recognize Spain. I don't want to assume people can recognize it. Go to Spain. Oh, there we go. Go to Spain. Now go down 1 click, over to the left 1 click. No, and then right there. That's Western Sahara, right? You may have noticed, you probably didn't notice, but on the map that Dr. Wang showed us, it was a little grayed out country on there. Why? Because it's not a self-governing territory. There's a protracted, stalled conflict that's been in place, and there's a massive refugee camp in Algeria where several 100,000 refugees have been living for 40 years. There's a government there in exile. That government conducts this diplomacy. It's recognized by 40 countries or 40 or so countries, and they have representatives all over the world in Washington, D.C. In fact, I actually just invited the Sahrawi ambassador to present to my conflict class. He came in person and presented on how diplomacy works for a self-determination movement in the middle of a conflict, right? So these kinds of, I'm just fortunate that my research has given me these kinds of connections and that they're willing to come talk to our students. Again, because we're so close to New York City, and it's not a difficult thing to arrange. We'll go to the next one. Right. So this is the Kurdish regional government of Iraq. This is what their diplomacy looks like. So I don't know if you noticed, but it's very different. I'm sorry. What this shows is the number of diplomatic meetings with each of the countries on the map. Right. So what this shows you is that the Kurdish government heavily invests in strong ties to the United States, as well as with parts of Europe and the Turkish government. Can you go back a slide? Right. Whereas the Sahrawi government really blankets the world in diplomats. Right. So that gives a puzzle right away. Why? Why do we see some countries focusing on specific very narrowly on a few powerful partners, and then we see another country in a similar situation really going all over the world trying to convince convince all the world's governments of their cause, right? I think I have answers for that, but I won't get into that today because then I'm just telling you what my book is about. So we'll hold on with that. So the last thing I want to say is the reason that I have been so passionate about setting this up is because I am a first-generation college student. I went to community college. I transferred twice. I had no idea what I was doing when I first enrolled in university. I had already been out of high school a couple of years. I just didn't know what I was doing. And fortunately, I had a professor pull me aside and say, you know, you seem to have a knack, or you seem to have a real interest in doing research. And she hired me as her research assistant. And I worked in a small lab environment that wasn't nearly as formal as the one we have here, but it showed me two things. For one, because I had high financial barriers myself, I realized there are a lot of students that cannot get involved in this because they work 30 hours a week like I did, right? So we've worked aggressively to try to create a funding stream for some of the students from low income backgrounds that have been working with us. And fortunately this year we actually got 2 grants, one from the university and then one from a nonprofit in New Jersey, where we can now hire students and pay them to be a part of this rather than expecting them to give away their time for free, right? So that's been something that we've been working very hard to set up, and this is the first year where it's actually the gears are moving and we're able to support students in that way. We can go to the final slide. I just figured I would stop. I just grabbed a screen grab of this article we published last year with 2 of our Diplo Lab students that made it into foreign policy and wound up being, you know, I received a lot of emails about it. Some very happy with the argument. There's always several who are very angry about it. But that's, if you're commenting on policy and international politics, that's just how it goes, right? So through Diplo Lab, we have this opportunity to foster student talent and creativity and really convince students, and they convince their peers, that the process, the thinking patterns involved in research serve you well beyond any specific research project, right? So that's all I'll talk about Diplo Lab. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Professor David Wood. He works on peace and security projects all over the Middle East. He came here 2 days ago from Yemen. He's recently worked in Lebanon, Syria, Libya. And I will say one other thing about Professor Wood is that he is the most relentless person in pursuing peaceful change that I've ever met. The amount of thought and sort of creativity he puts into trying to find a way to, in a society that is in the middle of conflict, to find ways of connecting people back together and bridging out of conflict. It's truly inspiring, and I hope he gets to talk a little bit about that. So.
That was a very humbling introduction. So thank you very much, Joey, Professor Huddelson. So good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to see you all. My name is Professor David Wood. I'm a professor of practice. What that means is I don't have the credibility of our dear colleagues here. I don't have a PhD. What I have is now 18 years of experience as a mediator in conflict. 8 of those years was in the former Soviet area. So I was working in places such as Georgia in 2008, mediating across the ceasefire line to ensure that farmers could get safely to tend their livestock or their land. I was in Ukraine in 2003, 2004 during the so-called Orange Revolution on looking at ensuring good accountability over democratic processes and making sure that both the Ukrainian and the Russian-speaking peoples were equally buying into the way that democracy was working. I was in Armenia and Azerbaijan, mediating the civil society level at a track 2 level over the types of social tensions that exist between communities and how they need to be overcome. And then for the last 10 years, since 2011, I've been in the Middle East, working on issues such as exchanges of bodies and prisoners within Libya, and also agreeing a process for rebuilding areas damaged by war in Libya, or working in Syria with a range of some of my personal heroes, local mediators, getting detainees out of prisons, or of making sure there were safe routes for evacuation for villages that were under threat. So that's a long way of saying that I'm a practical mediator, and my role is to bring that experience into the research and the learning hub that is Seton Hall University. And the reason that I'm here is in 2011, with the Arab Spring, I founded an international peace-building organization called Peaceful Change Initiative. And that experience was both amazing. We worked in Syria and Libya, but also demonstrated the restrictions of trying to mediate as a civil society representative, because you are viewed with a lot of suspicion because of your political background. And I wanted to change that and move under an academic umbrella. And I went to a lot of universities. And I have a good reputation in my field, which meant that a lot of doors were open. And I chose Seton Hall because it is good. And I mean that genuinely. It has a real creativity and flexibility in how it operates that allows us to work with students individually, collectively, to make sure they can be the best they can possibly be, but to give them active learning experiences. And that's very unique. So that's a bit of the background of why I'm here and why I think Seton Hall is important. In terms of in Seton Hall now, I'm more of an academic. I suppose my research areas cut across how conflicts escalate and de-escalate. What are the processes by which they gain momentum towards violence, as we've seen in Ukraine? Or that what are those moments and windows of opportunities that we can seize to de-escalate and move away from violence? That's one part. I also look at what Professor Huddelson referenced as protracted social conflicts. What this means is the interaction between a social conflict inside a state and the wider international foreign policy environment that Dr. Murphy was talking about, Professor Murphy was talking about. So to give an example of two things that are happening at the moment, because I think it's really prescient. Ukraine and Russia are the biggest food providers for most of the Middle East and North Africa. In 2011, one of the reasons that the Arab Spring kicked off was the increase in food prices because of the range of Russian forest fires, which decreased the amount of available grain within the world market, increased the price, and a gentleman in Tunisia burned himself alive because he couldn't afford bread. We're at a point now in Lebanon, which is going through one of the biggest inflations in world history, comparable to the Weimar Republic. I'm a millionaire now, is that we have a situation whereby it relies, 65% of its grain products come from Ukraine, 20% from Russia. The blast in the Beirut port, which you might have seen a year and a half ago, destroyed its grain facility. It can't feed its public at the moment. That's going to lead to tensions between Christian, Sunni and Shia around control of food productions, available economic opportunities. The way that this stuff happens globally influences politics locally, and vice versa. So if we look at some like Yemen at the moment, as we can't get access towards gas or petrol from Russia, we're reaching out to other regimes or countries, such as Saudi Arabia, and they're involved in conflict. Saudi Arabia is one of the protagonists within the conflict within Yemen. So what kind of green cards or permission are we giving to them to pursue or progress their wars within a place like Yemen? Now, often we think about these then as proxy conflicts. That means that the international community is at conflict within society. But it's often the other way around as well. So in a place like Yemen, for example, the local parties are in genuine conflict about something that is real, and they play off the international foreign policy to gain their own advantage. This is a critical thing, that you always have two levels in a protracted conflict: the way the international community is using it and the way it's using the international community. As my dear friend and colleague, and joining us as a visiting chair this semester, Raja Al-Talia, who's a member of the Women's Advisory Board to the Special Representative on the Syrian crisis, says, in Syria, peace depends on a Syrian solution and also an international solution. You need both levels. So I look at how that functions. I also look at how aid impacts on conflict dynamics. And I also look at the personal skills of the people that negotiate, what they do, what you need to be able to move beyond seeing the other side as an opposition towards being able to transform relationships with them. And we take that into the classes. The two classes that I contribute towards are the art and science of negotiation, whereby we work with students and we role play live conflicts. And we bring people from those conflicts into the classroom to tell them their thoughts, their experiences, their ambitions, their hopes, their desires, their fears, to enable better learning. And the other class then is Peacemaking and Peacekeeping, which is where we look at how you plan peace interventions. Can we go to the slideshow? That was just the introduction. That was the learning. The other part of the reason that I'm here is I was brought in to help grow a Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies that was established by my dear colleague, Professor Zheng Wang. This is one exactly. And this then looks to link the research that we're doing with actual practice and initiatives. What we have within the School of Diplomacy is an international non-governmental organization functioning under the umbrella of a research institution and changing lives, which is something I'm very proud about. So if you go to the next slide. So in principle, we have two areas, one which is headed by Professor Zhang Wang, who isn't with us today, which looks at US-China relations and Asia-Pacific. And he runs track 2 dialogues between the US and China to try and ensure that we don't have a return to war within the South China Seas. It's that significant an initiative. My work is in the Middle East, and it's trying to move a lot of these protracted conflicts, such as Libya, Syria, out of war into a more peaceful situation. On top of that, with Raja Altalia coming in, we now have a wonderful Women, Peace and Security program, where every month we're having a speaker, a woman who is negotiating conflict around the world, come in and talk about their experiences and share learning with the class. If you go to the next slide, please, sir. So what do I mean by we're actually living in the world? So this is a map of our programs within the Middle East and North Africa. We're focused on Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria. And we have some programs where we're supporting. We're inside someone else's program and we're steering it and helping it to be successful. There are others that we're delivering directly, and then we're working on policies. So in terms of support, in Libya, we've helped support rehabilitation of 12 cities damaged by war with $153 million spent, which is now benefiting about 2 million people. This is huge. This is enabling people to get back to life after war. This is a kind of a UNDP-led, delivered program, which is funded by a range of countries, including the US. In Lebanon, we're working very closely with the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs to ensure that education is provided to 30,000 refugees. Now, why are you involved in that? Because you're not an education specialist, you don't work with children. It's because the Syrian refugee movement into Lebanon has created massive social tensions and has triggered an escalation within their own social conflict. And with the economic crisis that's happening at the moment, you have a situation where the international community is providing aid to refugees, but Lebanese school teachers are not being paid, are on strike, and Lebanese children are not being taught. So this can create a lot of tension between Lebanese and Syrians. And we're going in there to help restructure the program to make sure it doesn't lead to these tensions and to actually shift it slightly so that Lebanese benefit. Similarly, we're doing a similar thing on water in Lebanon. And I was just out there on both of these programs a couple of weeks ago. In terms of direct interventions, in 2020, we were brought into Libya to mediate between the two ministries of health on the COVID-19 response. And this was done collectively with the UN Political Mission, with the World Health Organization, and with UNDP. What that led to was actually the reunification of the Ministry of Health. There were two, and now there's one. This was in support of the political process that was happening there. So that means that 6 million people approximately in Libya now have better access to healthcare, and you have more likelihood of a political stability. So when my old friend Fatih Bashara from Misrata was taking his armed forces last week towards Tripoli, I and many other people called and said, Fatih, what are you doing? There's a war in Ukraine, please turn around. And because of that wealth of phone calls from people like me, he turned around. So we can have an impact in terms of stopping war as well. In Yemen is the thing I'm most proud about that we're doing at the moment. And this is where the research comes together, because Professor Huddelson and I worked on some research into how Yemenis survive during a war economically. And this led us to this idea of a functional market, whereby we should be supporting these markets that function in really grey zones during war, irrespective of who controls them, if they're allowing people to survive and they're building bridges of trust across conflict divides. The German government liked it, and they gave us money to then deliver this theory in practice. And now we're working in 2 government-controlled governorates, 2 Houthi or Ansarallah-controlled governorates, bringing people together to agree on trading across lines. And I was just in, as Professor Allison said, in Yemen, and then in Jordan, where we brought these people together for the first time. And it was quite transformational in that sense. But it's also dealing with the live reality of conflict. We talk about women, peace and security and gender equality. 5 of our women participants were stopped by the police on the way to Amman because of the policies of one of the parties in the conflict towards women participation. So we teach about these issues, but then we also have to deal with the reality of what that means on the ground. In policy side, we're working with UNDP on its regional conflict prevention strategy. We're working with 4 Swiss embassies on making sure their peace programming is effective. We're working with the German government on designing their aid in Libya and Yemen. And we are facilitating a meeting of all donors in Yemen on the strategic approach to aid in the country. If you go to the last slide. But I don't do this. Seton Hall University students do this. So I work with an elite team of students who we work with and learn from, and we recognize that they have potential, and we pull them into the center, and they run these programs. So we have Pallavi over here, who's working with Professor Zheng Wang on the US-China dialogue, who is now the chief of operations at a large Indian organization, I think. We have Maria Teresa Gonzalez Esquivel, who now operates as our head of operations, and she has run research programs for the German government. We have Sushant Naidu, who's in Jordan at the moment and was facilitating the work of this work with the Yemenis, bringing them into Jordan. We have Padavish, who heads up our work in Lebanon and is in constant contact with the Swiss government around that work. We have Kyle, who is helping me facilitate these difficult dialogues within Libya, and is meeting and talking with senior Libyan officials on a weekly basis. And then we have Rebecca, who's the brains behind how we communicate our work. So you get direct involvement in mediating life conflicts, experience of management. So Professor Huddelson talked about experience of research. From my side, it's then the experience of actually managing programs in difficult settings, and then working with a range of diplomatic missions. And we're quite successful as a launch pad. So Pallavi has gone on to a job. Our last project officer, Hussein, is now the head of Ideas Beyond Borders within Iraq. And Sushant has passed his US State Department exams and will be leaving us relatively soon. So it's a launch pad for people. So, am I introducing someone? Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Very much, and to all our faculty who helped us today. And now you are free to enjoy your Saturday, so please feel free to go and do what you need to do on this Saturday. So thank you. Yes, we are putting the emails in the chat, and you also have my contact information. So next slide, please. Thank you. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the program, right? You've met our faculty. You have kind of an idea of what they do and how you can use this coursework and how you can apply it. But now we're going to talk about our majors. So Dean Smith was going to talk about this slide, so I'm going to introduce Dean Smith. We're going to talk a little bit about student success. You're also going to meet our students and learn a little bit more about what they do, right, and how they are active in this field. Dean Smith. And I'm going to stay right here because I'm next as well.
One of the things I love about my job is every time I hear our colleagues speak, I learn something new. I mean, the 4 professors that just talked, I've heard them, each one of them speak, some of them I've worked with for, 15, 20 years, heard them speak many, many times, and every time I learn something new. And that's not true only of our interaction with faculty. We also learn a lot from our students because our students are very accomplished. You see how they're engaged with our faculty. So it's time you heard from some of our students. As we do that, I want to remind you of the 2 key things I said about our students earlier, their academic accomplishments and their leadership on campus. Just as you hear from our students, keep these lenses on. I'm a very data-driven person, and the data that just wows me every time I see it is actually the very top bullet on the Dean's List. The Dean's List is those students who have a higher than a 3.4 GPA in a semester. Why is that important? Because if you graduate with more than a 3.4, you're getting your degree in honors, either cum laude, magna cum laude, summa cum laude. So this is means you're on a good trajectory, okay? It is amazing how many of these letters we send out each semester. You can see, and for some reason, it's very consistent. The past couple falls, it's been 62% of our students. 62%. We have 300 students and we're sending out like 185 or whatever it is letters to students and to families saying, hey, you're on the Dean's List, 55% every spring. That's an incredible testament to our students. It means they're not just doing well in their diplomacy classes. It means they're doing well in every class they're taking on campus, whatever it is. They're not just good in one area, they're good in all areas. So our students, you can see, we'll talk about, a lot of them have double majors. That's a very common if you're in the 4-year program that Dean Sanjumino will go through in a few minutes. They are just really accomplished students. So keep that in mind as you're hearing about them. The other thing is that they are active student leaders on this campus. They are amazing. There's a couple figures I could give here. The one that's not on this list, just because these are organizations that are heavily focused on the School of Diplomacy, meaning there's a lot of diplomacy students in them. They are open to anybody on campus, of course, but these are ones that are going to be very popular among diplomacy students. But the campus-wide student government organization, the SGA, let's talk about that for just 1 second. I want to highlight that diplomacy students make up about 5% of the population at Seton Hall. Right now, they are almost 33% of the student government on campus. The town hall for the spring SGA meeting will be on Monday night, and I'll be with them. And when I was there in the fall, the diplomacy table had as many students at it as the entire College of Arts and Sciences table, which has like, I don't know, 3,000 students in it or something like that, and was bigger than any other table after that. That's how active our students are on this campus and how the students see themselves as peers, okay? Some ways that you can get involved in the School of Diplomacy that you'll hear about from our students are the first 2 are Model UN oriented. And I just want to highlight Shuna, the top one. That's our team that goes and competes at other conferences. And before the pandemic hit, they were a top 50 team. They wanted to become a top 25 team. They picked what conferences they went to. They did the training. They set the strategy. And by the time the pandemic hit, they were ranked 12th in the country. So not only did they reach their goal, they cracked it in half. Okay, that is amazing. Another organization I want to highlight, because the editor-in-chief is here with us today, is the Diplomatic Envoy. It's one of the Diplomatic Envoy, the Global Current. These are ways in which you can engage in international affairs, but also hone your skills in news, in media. The Diplomatic Envoy is our student newspaper. You've maybe gotten a copy in the mail. You've maybe seen it online. You'll hear from Jared in a minute. He's the editor-in-chief. I've been the advisor for the Diplomatic Envoy since it was created. And I want to highlight 2 things about that. One, I had absolutely no role in coming up with this idea. Okay, it was students who came up with the idea. And that's true of all these organizations. We don't sit around and say, what student organization should we create? Our students decide what organizations they create. I actually have a couple students coming to see me this week because they want to create a new international, it's IROC, International Relations of Cuisine Club. I'm like, oh, I'll hear about that. So anyway, but with the Diplomatic Envoy, so I didn't create it. We didn't have the idea. Students did. The other thing is they do all the work. I'm the advisor, but all I do is read it and pay for it. That's it. They do everything else. So that's true of all our organizations. And they're widely recognized on campus. The last one I'll highlight is the bottom one, the Black Diplomacy Student Organization. After the murder of George Floyd, we had a group of students, faculty, alumni, staff come together. We had discussions about different ways the school could better address issues of diversity, inclusion, social justice. And one of the things that came out of that was a dedicated organization to support our Black students. And they created the organization, includes both graduate and undergraduate students. And in its first year, this is not this academic year, last academic year, at the end of the year, it won the award on campus for the best new student organization on the entire campus. Okay? And again, that's because of their work and what they did. And the BDSO, as we call it, had an event on Thursday night. It was a screening of a documentary on the role of Black diplomats in the U.S. State Department. And not only did they have the screening of the event, it was on PBS, The American Experience, so you may have caught it. It was on about a month ago, but we screened it last night. And not only did the students put together the event, but they were able to get the woman who directed the documentary, the man who wrote the book, the professor who wrote the book on which the documentary was based, to speak on a panel. They had, and they had two current Black Foreign Service officers, one of whom is a School of Diplomacy alumni, speak about their experiences. So it's not just screening, it's about building, and they did that work. They sent out the invitations, they identified the people. Our students are truly remarkable, and it's time you heard from them. So I'd like to start by introducing Nicholas Kimball. And he's going to come up and talk about his experience so far in the school. He's relatively earlier in his career path. I'll say a couple more words, and then I'm going to have you to meet some students that are closer to graduating. So, Nicholas, come on up, please.
First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for being here. It's definitely a really great time. Definitely a great day to be with all of you. My name is Nick Kimball. I'm part of the Bronson Speech and Debate Team, which is a top 10 ranked speech and debate team. We have conferences every weekend, which at times make things rather difficult, but it's always a fun experience to learn from other people and understand how we can better advance the world. In a sense, a lot of times when we're debating topics, it's political topics, things about the political left or the political right or international sequences. And by doing those things, I take them into the classroom. And when I'm in the classroom setting, it's always even more that I'm learning from other students and classmates, that especially with this crisis, I've been able to learn more about Ukraine and Russia and many other things. And then also being a part of the undergrad student diplomacy, which we have the great president Patrick here, is a really great organization with other undergraduate students where we kind of have many events hosted about understanding more about diplomacy and how as students we can make that impact in our own societies. And I've been able to fortunately get in fellowship with the Hoover Institution at Stanford that I'll be able to participate in this summer, where I'll be able to do some research on tyranny, which is just understanding more about how we can hopefully stop tyranny from happening in today's society. And then also I've done various community service projects throughout being in high school. I led the Edison Civic Change Collective, which I'm from Edison, New Jersey, which is a very high population of American immigrants. And with doing this collective, I was able to help many citizens in my area understand more about how they can kind of get involved and how they can learn about the different things going on in our nation today, whether it's domestically or internationally. And I was able to get an award from Governor Murphy in the Dr. Martin Luther King Award in community service for, I believe it was like 900 hours of community service, which I was able to do throughout my time. And ultimately, thank you. Thank you. And it has ultimately just been a really great time to be at Seton Hall University and learn from everyone that's around here, whether it's a diplomacy student, faculty, staff, aides, anyone. It's ultimately the biggest thing about being in diplomacy or trying to have a career in some sense of being able to make a change in our international world is learning from other people around us each and every day and adding it to our skill set so that we can lead the world that we want to ultimately live in. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it off to the next student.
So one of the reasons why I asked Nicholas to be here today is he's also in the 3+3 program.
I am, yes.
And he's alive and well. You can do it. You could still go and do other, organizations and activities and have a life. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
All right.
So one of the things about having really outstanding students is that we need to make sure that we're providing them with opportunities to excel and take those steps to the next level. So what we do is we have a strong program of identifying students and helping them prepare for prestigious programs and fellowship opportunities. Like Nick mentioned, the Hoover program that he's going to do. This is some different examples of prestigious fellowships that our students have gone on to take. Some of these are foreign language study related. That's true of the Boren at the top and the Critical Language Scholarship at the bottom, where you can get funding to work on your foreign languages. Some of them are designed to help diversify the foreign service in the U.S. government. That's true of the Pickering Fellowship and the Wrangle. We have one of our undergraduates, in fact, the one who runs the BDSO, just got a Wrangle. Some of them are about getting overseas international experience. That would be true of the Fulbright Fellowship in the middle. And here's another example of where our students are truly remarkable. About 10 years ago, Seton Hall had an initiative that we wanted to have more Fulbrights on campus. And Seton Hall has done that, where Fulbrights are, you get as you graduate and you spend a year abroad, either teaching English or doing research, one or the other. And of the students who've gotten Fulbrights at Seton Hall over the last 10 years, 70% are diplomacy majors. Again, that's 5% of the population on campus are getting 70% of the Fulbright awards. If you look at something like the Truman toward the bottom, the Truman pays for your graduate study, it gives you a little bit of money for the rest of your undergrad, highly prestigious. The Truman Rhodes Marshalls, these are really impressive. Seton Hall has had 3 Truman Scholars. We had one a couple of years ago, diplomacy student. We had one about 20 years ago, diplomacy student. We had one back in the 1970s, wasn't a diplomacy student, but we didn't have a school of diplomacy then. So I like to say, since the school of diplomacy was around, 100% of the Truman Scholars from Seton Hall.
And it only takes 50 a year.
Correct. Yeah. And we have certain, actually it kind of runs in the family. We have families where one sister has gotten a Truman and one's gotten a Boren. So it's pretty cool. In any case, what we want to cultivate our students while they're here, so that way they're ready to have these opportunities as they go off into the world and see what they've done, as they start our program and begin with experiences like Nick, and then where they are when they're getting ready to graduate. And that's why I'd like to bring up our next student, Jarrett Deng, who's had many leadership roles, and he will see how many bullet points are on the slide. So I'll let Jarrett come up and talk about his experiences. Jarrett, please.
All right. Hi, everybody. Oh, am I going on the mic? Yes, I am. All right. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come see us speak today. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a senior in the School of Diplomacy with a double major in economics and minors in journalism and French. And this is my last semester on campus. So I'm graduating in 2 months. So really excited about that, but also a little bit nervous. And I just wanted to speak upon what Seton Hall has really brought me in terms of personal development and career development. And one of the first things that really sets Seton Hall apart, I feel like, in reference to other schools of international relations or just other experiences you could have, is the small size and the nurturing attitude that the school gives you. And the first thing that I want to touch upon there is just how accessible all of the staff is. So Dean Sanjamino, Dean Smith, I know them personally, and I think at a smaller school, you really get the opportunity to interact with these staff and form relationships where you are able to call upon these people, able to form relationships and just succeed because they're invested in you. And I've seen no more success in this than in my career development. I've had 3 internships in my college career. First one was at the American Red Cross. The second one was at the U.S. mission to the United Nations, where I interned in the press section. And my current internship is at Marketplace, which is a show on NPR that airs to about 8 million people every week. So my interest is really in mass media and communications, and the school has really helped me foster this interest. in the career sense, we have our own dedicated career advising session. Dr. Ruby, who's right over there, is a really, really big part of why I've been able to succeed in my 4 years at Seton Hall. And, I regularly would just email her and it's like, Dr. Ruby, I'm thinking of applying to this internship or this job. Could you please look at my cover letter for me? And she's always happy to do it. And she's the reason that I've been able to be so successful in my 4 years. And the second part I really want to talk about is on-campus engagement. Now, like Dean Smith said, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Diplomatic Envoy newspaper and the executive producer of the Global Current podcast. And just this and all of the other student organizations on campus really help you grow as a person and professionally. And I think at Seton Hall, it's also easier to get involved just because it is such a small school and you're able to take leadership roles and take that next step in your career and personal development. And yeah, I think that's about it. But thank you so much for the time, and I'll hand it to the next student.
Julie and Nicholas couldn't be with us today, but I just pulled one of our students who was in the audience, and this is Patrick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Condon. I am a junior here in diplomacy. I'm double majoring in economics, which is a sort of common thing to do, actually. It's quite easy to do that. And I'm minoring in French, which pretty much just means that I'm taking 4 years of a language. So you're actually able to get a minor in that language as long as you take it for 4 years. I don't have a slide, but currently I am the president of the Undergraduate Diplomacy Student Association, which is a very old association here, but it's kind of being rebranded now. It's quite new. I helped found it, or refound it really in the fall with a few of my classmates, and we have been able to host a number of events with students here, with speakers, and to kind of connect a lot of things. And one of the main things that I've done with that, which I'm most proud of, is that I've increased engagement within the diplomacy school, within all of the organizations here. We have either 12 or 13 diplomacy organizations here. And I am on a council that kind of oversees the coordination of all of these organizations, of which Jarrett runs 2 of them. So he is a member of this council as well. And it's really great to see, to bring everyone together and really see what everyone's working on and kind of increase cooperation. And so I've been really happy that I've been able to do that. But outside of the diplomacy school, I'm the president of Pride, which is the LGBTQ organization here on campus to represent the LGBTQ community here. I am a staff writer for the Envoy, actually. I wrote notes that I should probably look at. I am the co-founder of the mentorship program, which is pretty much all the freshmen that are here are put into a mentorship program through Dulce, which is our Diplomacy United Leadership and Communication Exchange. And so the freshmen that are here are actually in it. And Andrew, who will be speaking in a bit, is actually one of my mentees. And so looking back a year ago, I think, Andrew was in one of these information sessions. It was online, and we were just talking about our experiences so far. I was talking to him about a class that I was in, speaking about refugee settlement in West Africa. And he had actually asked me a question about that because he's a student here from Liberia. And he had expressed that he was interested in these almost exact same thing. And so I noticed that when he was admitted and he ended up coming here, I immediately picked him on and said, oh my gosh, Andrew's here. He has to be my mentee. And so now he's actually a part of UDSA as well, my organization here. And so I've been very proud to see kind of Andrew prosper in the past few months. And he's actually running now to be a senator in SGA. So I'm also very happy for that. Yeah. What else? I am on the board of advisors of the school, so I'm a student representative to that. Myself, Acacia Palmer, who is the president of the Black Diplomacy Student Association, and then our 2 senators of diplomacy are all on the board. The board actually meets 1 week from yesterday. Yes. And for the first time, we will have Madam Leigh McGwoe at the actual board meeting. For anyone who doesn't know who Leigh McGwoe is, she's a world-renowned peace activist from Liberia. She's a Nobel Prize laureate, and we have actually just welcomed her in the past month, I believe, to our board of advisors to help increase student opportunities and really make us a little bit more aware of the peace activist part of diplomacy. And so there's been a few people who have talked about that before, but like you can really have that experience here when you meet people like this. And she will be speaking at an event, I think, coming up.
April 7th.
April 7th, we will be having an event.
Peace security lecture series that Professor Wood mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And that will be a virtual event, so unfortunately it's in the middle of the school day, but it's like a lunchtime event, but it is virtual, so we can send out the link. That's April 7th.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to be going to that, and especially next week to actually meet Ms. Gloy. But my most excited thing to say is that
Waiting for you.
yes. I am very excited to announce that I was just accepted into the Graduate Institute in Geneva, Switzerland, a part of our first cohort to go there from the school. This is a new program with the school that we don't really talk about much, but I think is like the most important thing that the school has ever offered, because I'm in it, I guess. So it is pretty much a 3+2 program, which you talked about, 3 years undergrad, 2 years master's. But essentially, I will be going next semester, my first semester of senior year, to Switzerland. I'll be studying at the Graduate Institute for 3 months. I'll be studying international and development studies with a focus on mobilities, migration, and boundaries is the name of it. And so I'm able to continue that. And I'm very excited to be doing that. And I'll be going for my 5th year to finish my master's there. And my dream coming to the school really was to work with the UN or any agencies outside the UN. And through this, I'm really kind of seeing more of my goal come closer to me, because the UN is also, there's 2 centers of the UN. One of them is here in New York, and then one of them is in Geneva. And so hoping that by going there, I will have more opportunities for that. Also kind of related to that, last semester, I actually interned for the former Foreign Minister of Yemen, Khalid al-Yamani. He served in Yemen for a few years, from 2016 to 2018, during the current government. But because of a lot of issues that have kind of happened in Yemen recently, as we know, in the Yemeni civil war, which is one of the largest and most grave humanitarian crises right now in the world, it's kind of thrown the world into this scheme in the Middle East yet again. And so kind of interning for him was quite interesting, because I got to see things that I had never known. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I had never been to the East Coast before this. And so this is kind of a shock to me, even, being here 3 years, it's still a shock to me every time I go into New York. I absolutely love it. But interning with him was incredible, because I was able to see the inner workings of a government, of a foreign ministry, and especially him being a former UN diplomat. He actually was one of the secretary generals of one of the kind of like side assemblies, not the General Assembly, but one of the side meetings of assemblies. So I get to experience a lot of things that he had done in the past years, and that was absolutely incredible. I met incredible people, and I have met actually many US diplomats through that because of his work with them. And so it was really incredible to have that experience and to have the experience that I've had so far. And I mean, I could talk all day, but I guess we should probably get to the next student. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. That was extemporaneously. That was with, filling in for someone. All right. So how do they get all this? You heard from our faculty, and you heard from a few students. And by the way, you're going to hear from many more students on internships and career development as well. But let's talk a little bit about our program. So what makes our school different? First of all, I hope you can all hear me. The School of Diplomacy is a school. We're not a department, housed within Arts and Sciences. We are a separate college, one of the colleges within Seton Hall University. And as such, we can design, our curriculum, and that we think would be of benefit, right, to the students. So if you would look in your folders, you're going to pull out some sheets. I have 3 sheets in there. And you'll notice on all 3 sheets, 3 majors, we have 3 majors, there is a foreign language requirement. Every student in the School of Diplomacy must demonstrate a proficiency in a foreign language. And if you glance at the sheets, any program, any of the 3 majors that you're interested in, you'll see that we begin this in the elementary level. So this is an opportunity for you to choose a new foreign language. So what is advanced proficiency? What do you mean by that? Advanced proficiency is beyond advanced 2, right? It means that you could take a course or 2. In some programs, we require 6 credits beyond advanced 2 to demonstrate that you have mastered that foreign language. So it could be a literature course. It could be a cinema course. We have business writing as well. So you are applying that foreign language, right? It's not stagnant that it's just coming one way. You need to demonstrate that you can use this language. What are the languages that Seton Hall offers? You see them up here: Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Russian, and Spanish. And the languages that seem to be very much of interest right now are Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. We have a very strong Russian program, actually all the foreign languages. However, if you are interested in government service, those are the three that they call critical languages. If you're interested in just, private sector or anything else, private sector, they're calling them preferred languages. So if you have one of those on your resume, again, it helps you, move to that other pile, right? The preferred pile. Next slide. Study abroad seminars. So the university offers opportunities for students to take study seminars. And I'm frequently asked, does the School of Diplomacy require a study abroad? Okay, so we do not require a study abroad, but what we want to do is offer you opportunities, okay, to have that experience. So we offer actual coursework taught by our faculty members, and they're called study seminars, and we offer them during spring break, and Dean Smith actually runs a course on the UN during the summer. So you can take a class with us, okay, and one of our faculty members and get that experience. If you do it during spring break, it's part of your spring registration, and it falls under your financial aid or your scholarship money. It's part of the coursework. And how does it work? So how do you do these, right? These study seminars. So the way it works is you take the coursework, okay, during the semester, and it culminates in the application of it. And when you do the study seminar, if you're going abroad, if you're going to China, Cuba, Cyprus, wherever, you actually apply, right, what you've been learning all semester. With the course that Dean Smith teaches on the UN, they meet at Seton Hall. Okay, this is one of the summer programs, very early in the morning. They have already, prepared and conducted their readings and their research. They take a bus to New York City. They spend the day at the UN. Then they come back here, and then they debrief and discuss and have conversations through dinner at Seton Hall University. Then they get up and they do it again. So that, again, is an opportunity for you to get that international experience. You do not, again, we're not required that you take or do a study abroad. However, there are many third-party opportunities for a study abroad. Many of our students have taken those. And there are third-party vendors that Seton Hall University has an Office of International Programs that they must approve. And then within the school, we must approve to make sure it's a legitimate program. You're going to get a transcript back. And we put all the pieces in place so that the credits come back here to Seton Hall. Now, when I have students ask me, where they should go, or, we have some discussions, right? So you have to approve it. And what I'd like to see is for you to take advantage of your foreign language study, right? So if you are interested in doing your continuing Spanish from high school, which you can do, or French, you don't have to take one of the other new language. I would say, hey, why don't you think about going to one of those countries? You can pick up a semester's worth of credits towards your foreign language. All right, so that's something for you to think about. You can also take a study abroad during the summer through one of these vendors as well, and you could pick up 6 to 9 credits in that foreign language, right, during the summer. So that's something for you to think about. There are different ways to package and put together that experience, that international relations, experience. You heard Patrick chat a little bit about Geneva. It's a relatively new program that we're rolling out. We also have rolled out an exchange program with the Moscow University, their premier university, MIGMO, of international relations. There was a student exchange. It's paused right now, but hopefully it'll be back and up and running as soon as it's safe to do so. Next slide. So this is an example of where of some of the places that the students have already study abroad. And thank you, Christian, because he did this slide for me. Appreciate it. Good job. So it gives you an idea of where you can go and where and how you can take advantage of what? Of some of the languages that you language study. Next slide. So the programs, let's get down to the programs. So you have 3 sheets in your folder. We have the BS, which is the 4-year program. We have a BSMA, which is an accelerated program, right? They call that the 5-year program, 3+2. And then we have a 6-year program, which is the BSJD, another accelerated program. And that's with Seton Hall Law School. And I guess this is a good time for me to announce that Dean Smith is also Vice Dean at Seton Hall Law School. BS in Diplomacy. So this is the most flexible of all our programs, okay? And why? Because you have some free electives in this program, and most of the students in this program have a double major. And it's because they chatted with me, and I encourage that. You know, rather than just take random free courses, you have to, really be mindful that, you would like to have a credential out of this too, not just random courses. So if you declare 2 majors, right, that's a credential. That's on your transcript. That's with you forever and ever and ever. So it's important to start thinking of this in your freshman year. And look at the sheet and look at what you can fill in. The foreign language is built in. It's already there, right? So now what? Now you have your major. In diplomacy, it's built in. So what you would like to do is utilize some of the other credits that you have towards what? Modern languages. If you continue the language that you started in high school, and then you want to pick up, and then you have to pick up a new language with me. Doesn't necessarily be new, but you can pick up a new language. By studying the 2 languages, you can have a double major in modern languages, okay? Real simple, it's right there. Using those free electives and then using the language requirement that we have. The other popular one is economics. Why? Because 12 of the 15 credits in economics is already in our program. That's a very popular double major, also a minor, by the way. And there's also the opportunity for the minor in the foreign language. If you start a new language with us, you will, and meet our requirement, you're automatically going to have a minor in that. So those are popular. Also, we see journalism. Environmental sciences right now is increasingly popular. We have women's studies. So there are a number of different opportunities. But my advice to you is start thinking of it as a freshman. Okay, start thinking of it as a freshman. Next slide. So the BSMA. The BSMA is, I think it's a blue sheet, right, that you have, color coding. And the BSMA is an accelerated program. So in order to have an accelerated program, what? We had to pull off a few of the credits so that you could start taking graduate classes, accelerate to the graduate portion of it. This program has some flexibility, okay, for minors. Okay, for additional minors. The way the program is structured is you apply to the graduate portion of the program in the beginning of your junior year, all right, your 3rd year. And then your 4th year, guess what? You are a graduate student. I'm going to now, this program, you can apply for the program as, my sheet is blue. You can apply to this program as a freshman. You can apply to the BSMA upon admission, okay? Or you can apply as a student. And it's kind of up to maybe their sophomore year. There's enough flexibility that if you would like to pursue the BSMA, you can certainly apply. If you have the GPA requirement and the recommendations from our faculty, you will be admitted. And the beginning of that 4th year, you are taking graduate level courses, okay? When you complete 18 credits on the graduate level, when you complete 18 credits on the graduate level. And by the way, 9 credits is full-time in a semester in graduate school. So you have your fall semester is 9 credits, your spring semester is 9 credits, 18 credits. When you complete those 18 credits, that's when we give you a bachelor's degree. Okay, you've earned enough credits for your bachelor's degree. So that's at the end of your 4th year. You've been taking grad classes all along. At the end of that year, we give you your undergraduate degree, your bachelor's degree. And you'll be graduating and attending commencement with all the students that you started with in your freshman year. Okay, then you finish your last year of credits and you receive your master's degree. It's a full 45 credit master's degree. Questions? Questions on the BS or the BSMA before I move on? No? Okay. The third accelerated program is the 3+3, all right? And that's with Seton Hall Law School. It's extremely competitive. The admissions requirements are extremely competitive. And you must apply as a freshman. You cannot opt into this program. Okay, you must apply as a freshman. You can opt out if you wish, but you cannot opt in. This is very structured. Why? Because you're only doing your undergraduate work for 3 years, and we're taking off 30 graduate credits. 30 graduate credits. We're taking off those credits because you're taking them at the law school. So the 30 credits we're removing from the undergrad are now 30 law school credits you're taking, a 1L. When you complete your 1L at Seton Hall Law School, at the end of that year, that 4th year, or your 1L, that's when you get your bachelor's degree. So you're doing 3 years with the School of Diplomacy and International Relations. At the beginning of your 3rd year or your junior year, you apply to Seton Hall Law School, you do the application, the LDAC, you have to take your LSATs by December of that year, and you must have the GPA requirement that is in your offer of admission letter. If you are accepted, that coming fall is when you begin your law school classes. I can tell you that we were the first college within Seton Hall University to offer the 3+3 with Seton Hall Law School. I have one student who last year was admitted. She's finishing her 1st year of the law school. I have been notified that we have 3 that have already been accepted for the incoming fall. It is competitive. It is quite a bit of work, but as you could see, you could survive, right? And you are also required, again, to do that foreign language requirement. Just as I said, just like all the other programs, we do have the foreign language requirement. Questions on the 3+3? No? Okay. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Catherine Ruby, who is going to chat a little bit about our internships and career development. Dr. Ruby.
So welcome. Thank you all for coming today. I guess I get to end this session with a talk on the career development and internship aspects of the program, and then we'll have some students come up and speak about their internships. So as Patrick mentioned, the School of Diplomacy is unique because we do have our own career office, which is my office at the school. I work only with School of Diplomacy students. And my goal, the school's goal for you, is to be career ready at the end of your 4 years here. What does career ready mean? It means that you are learning career competencies, which include teamwork, leadership, professionalism, etiquette, communication. And as you've heard from our professors, you're going to learn that in your classroom. But you're also going to learn it in the programming that the career office does, and also through our academic internship program. So I work with students beginning in the freshman year. So it's really important that you link up with the office in your first year here. And the goal for freshmen is first to develop a resume, second to get on LinkedIn and start doing research on what careers in the IR field look like, and third to attend some of the career development sessions. So we're a school that says, yes, you're going to do an academic internship, it's mandatory, but we're also a school that supports you through that process. And so that's sort of my main job at the school. So the academic internship program is required of 100% of our students. If you look through our folder, you will see that there's, I think it's almost 8 pages of internship post sites where our students have interned. Alongside the academic internship hours, so students in the academic courses work or intern 150 hours at the internship post site. That's only one component of the internship course. There's a course that runs alongside the internship hours where you're required to think about the skills that you're gaining at the internship. So we try to force you to think about that, because that's difficult to think about what you're good at, what you're not so good at, what you're interested in. So we try to encourage that through discussion boards, through a couple classes where we share, interns share what they're doing. As part of the internship course, we also have a very extensive supervisor's assessment form where you write down and respond to the survey on how you think you've done in the internship. Your supervisor does the same thing. And then at the end of the course, you get to look at, well, what did my supervisor think I did well? Does that match with what I did well? And so that's where you gain some sense of where your strengths are, and also what things you might need to work on. So we offer, as part of our career development series, I work with students on resume and cover letter review. So as freshmen, you will be expected to work with me to develop a college level resume. The internship advising is for sophomore students who are thinking about internships and where they would like to work. So we work on a list of target organizations where you'd like to apply. I encourage sophomores to look directly at the websites at the organizations where they're going to apply to, because you got to meet the deadline. And some of these deadlines are 1 year before the time that you will be participating in your internship. So we'll develop an Excel spreadsheet. You've got information on it, deadlines, requirements, things like that. We'll go through mock interviews, behavioral interviewing, which is sort of a storytelling type of interview, is what employers at internship sites do these days, and that takes practice to do. So we'll go through practice sessions. Actually, I have a little cup, and the students smile because they've done it, that little plastic cup in my office, and you pick out a question, and I read it to you, and then you answer as if you're in the interview, and then we talk about your response to that. I liaise with internship host sites, and that liaison is based on our students' interests. So that list that you have is always changing because students' interests change. We also, through the generosity of our alumni, we have an internship scholarship. And the way we motivate students to do career development, which they need to do to get to the internship host site, is that to be eligible for the internship scholarship, you need to have participated in 4 career development sessions. And we keep track. So we expect that as freshmen and sophomores, you're starting that, attending some of the sessions, so that you can meet that requirement, but so also that you're prepared to participate in your internship when it's time to do that. So the internship scholarship covers supplementary costs of the internship, which might be professional attire, commuting. Once COVID is over, we hope that more internship host sites will return to in person. We're seeing that this semester. And other incidental costs of the internship are covered here. So the maximum for a student doing a local internship might be $750. For students who go to DC, it's, I think the maximum goes up to $1,700. So as part of your intern, you have to apply for the scholarship, and as part of that, we ask for your budget and the faculty scholarship, and then reviews the funding that you'll receive. But we do understand that there are costs associated with the internship, and we help as much as we can. Let's go to the next slide. So this is giving you kind of a sample of where students recently have interned. We see the Council on Foreign Relations. Dr. Huddelson spoke about that. Research think tanks are a great place for undergraduates if you're looking to be involved in sort of, I call it the functional areas of the think tanks, which is more like social media, promotion, writing on blogs, helping coordinate some of their events. Those are where the undergraduate students fit. We've had a couple students do research, but the other sorts of internships at think tanks are a little more appealing. U.S. State Department, we've had, Jared mentioned the U.S. mission to the UN. We've had a number of students there in the past couple years. During COVID, our internship host sites were very, very generous in turning the internships from in-person to virtual. So the internship program went on. Undergraduate students are also interested in interning at country missions to the United Nations, and also at Senate offices and congressional offices. Those are great first internship experiences, because that experience is noted in jobs that for lobbying groups, or if you want to make a career working on the Hill, you need that sort of experience in the congressional or senator's office. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so semester in Washington, D.C. program. It's kind of unique to the school. The program itself is housed in the School of Diplomacy. It is open to students from across the university. So this is an opportunity to intern and learn in Washington, D.C. Our classroom there is at the United Nations Foundation, which is 1750 Pennsylvania Avenue, right in the heart of where the action is. And we have a professor there, Professor Ray Walser, who is a retired Foreign Service officer and also has a PhD in European Affairs, and worked at the Heritage Foundation, a very well-known think tank in DC. So he's a Washington, DC insider. So students go there and work with me on finding an internship. And the internships in Washington, D.C. tend to be 30 hours a week. So they're full-time internships. So your schedule is Monday to Thursday at your internship, and then Friday you're in class with Professor Walser at the UN Foundation. So you're taking 2 classes with Professor Walser. Because the internships are 30 hours, you can get credit for 2 internships, so 6 credits of internship courses. So the reason that's important is that the 6 courses of internship plus the 6 courses with Dr. Walser make you a full-time student. And what does that mean? It means that you can take your Seton Hall University financial aid and use it to cover the cost of tuition in the semester in DC program, because you're in Seton Hall University courses, but you're just in a different location. So it's become very appealing to our students. Housing in DC, students have found housing co-ops that serve Washington interns from across the country. So one of them is WISH, the Washington Intern Student Housing Group, and there are a couple others. And then they offer shared accommodation in furnished apartments, and it makes it very easy to transition to DC. Let me talk about our career days. Pre-COVID, we would do a one-day trip to Washington, D.C. in the fall semester and a one-day trip in the spring semester in New York City. And when we were in each of the cities, we would visit human resources areas in organizations that typically hire diplomacy students. So in New York, we visited CNN, the Council on Foreign Relations, the U.S. mission to the UN. In D.C., we visited the CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. We visited the U.S. State Department and visited the United Nations Foundation, where our classes are held. So we hope to bring these action-packed days back when COVID is over. So these are some of our professional development activities where we help you find out what sort of career you might be interested in the field. It's really important that you're able to speak about what you're interested in, what you're good at, and what your goal is. And I think that's probably the hardest thing for all of us to do. And so through these career development sessions, we're helping you with that skill. And we've drawn on our alumni to come and speak to us about their careers in the field. Just about 3 weeks ago, we had 3 alum who work in the non-government organization area sector, and they came to speak about their work there, why they're doing it, what they liked about it. So as I said, we do a lot of things, the elevator pitch, which that's what you need. That's your answer to the question in an interview. Well, tell me about yourself. That's your elevator pitch. So these are some of the things that we do. So let's go to the next one. I already spoke about the diplomacy students' career days. So don't do that on that one. Okay, so career destinations. I'm always asked, well, what do your alumni do? After I graduated from the program, where can I go? So we have done a survey of bachelor degree students in June 2019 and June 20. And based on the data that came back from that survey, 77% of our students found jobs 0 to 6 months from their graduation date. Now, my caution with this is that the sample size was small, and because students we did it by email, and I sometimes think students don't read their emails anymore. And there was a breakdown, and I thought that was in the slide. We had a breakdown of the sectors that students were working in. Of those employed, 20% were in the private sector, 50% were in the nonprofit sector, which includes non-government organizations, think tanks and foundations, and 30% were in the public sector, which was all levels of government. So that's sort of a breakdown of where the employed students were working. And then the other point that I thought was very interesting is 30% of our undergraduate students went on to graduate school immediately following their bachelor's degree. So that would include law school and other Master of Arts programs in International Affairs. So I'm going to end my presentation there and invite the student speakers to come and talk about their internships. So you can introduce each other. All right, okay.
First, you want me to? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm Michaela. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, or like a little north of Boston. I am a senior here at the School of Diplomacy, so this is a little bittersweet for me. This is my last one that I will be doing, and I remember like coming as a freshman, well, I guess before my freshman year, and being in the same seats as you guys. So it's definitely a little bittersweet for me. To be here, but I am in the four-year program. I have a double major in economics, thank you to Dean San Gimino, like she was saying. And then my minors are in Spanish and Latin America Latino studies. So my like concentration, like global concentration, I know they talked about that quite a while ago, but my global concentration is in Latin America and the Caribbean. During my time at Seton Hall, I have been fortunate enough to work for the School of Diplomacy, actually. So I work with our graduate assistant race and under Dean San Gimino. That has been one of the highlights of my time here. I have got to form so many incredible relationships with the faculty and staff, and I really think that is something that I will like carry on after graduation. I know that you guys just had so much information. This is more at the students rather than the parents, but I know you guys just had so much information thrown at you guys, and you are about to hear from so many incredible people who have accomplished really amazing things. But I promise you, at the end of the day, we still are students. We do not have it all put together. We might look like we do on the surface, but like we are all still learning. We are all still making efforts to grow in our studies, in our presence on campus. So I promise it will all work out. Whatever happens, it will all work out. I guess I will talk a little bit about my internships. I have been fortunate enough to have 2 internships, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. They have both been virtual. My first one was at the Borgen Project, which is a nonprofit that aims to bring global poverty to U.S. foreign policy. At that internship, I was a foreign policy intern, which I found to be really, really interesting. But as Dr. Ruby was saying, internships are also a really great way to learn about what you don't want to do. And while I love my time there, I found out that writing policy for the rest of my life is just not something that I personally want to do. And right now I am interning at an immigration law firm back home in Boston, where I get to write briefs. I get to advocate on behalf of asylum seekers. And that has been some of the most rewarding work that I have ever been able to do. So post-graduation, which is a little scary to talk about, like Jared touched on, I am going hopefully to work for a little bit and then figure out if I want to pursue a master's degree in global health or if I want to pursue a law degree in immigration and like human rights law. So that was a little bit about me. I will be around obviously after to answer any questions you may have. And yeah, I promise it will all work out how it's supposed to.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me, or do I need to move to the mic? I'm good? Okay, so my name is Andrew Travis. I'm a first-year student here at Seton Hall in the School of Diplomacy, and most of what I would say is already been said by all of the students. So, but I wanted to point out that what I really have gotten out of being here, even in my first semester and my second semester, is just the relationships that I've been able to build, the connections that I've been able to make with students, with faculty and staff, just that I found that it really pushes me to do more and to continue and to push to be the best student that I can be in my studies and in my in the connections that I built, and then also getting involved on campus in the different organizations. There are so many different organizations that each and every student has been able to be a part of, and so there's no real limit to what you can do and also what you're interested in. So I just wanted to point that out, and and so I didn't really mention what about me. So basically, I'm involved with student government. I'm running to be a senator in the School of Diplomacy, And also, I am an officer in the Undergraduate Diplomacy Student Association. And also, another thing is the mentorship program that Patrick had mentioned earlier, and how I got connected in this same type of session. It has had such an impact on me, and it's led me to get more involved and to be a part of the community. So I just wanted to point that out. And yeah.
Foreign languages.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm studying French. I'm interested in West Africa. My family's in West Africa at the moment, in Liberia. And so I want to go back and work in development, economics in that region. And so French is the other language other than English that is important in that region. So that's what I'm focusing on. Yeah.
This is all part of professional development. I can go them up there and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Elevated.
Yeah.
My name is Christian Almestiga, and I am a freshman as well. I'm in the 3+3 program, also in the honors program, and I also work with Michaela study. And essentially, I would say that the school has a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of stuff here for you. There's a lot of moments where you could really grab at something, but you gotta go find it. There's a lot of clubs and a lot of times where, especially I'm looking towards graduates, I'm looking towards seniors, I'm looking towards juniors to see what they're doing, and with the amount of clubs you could build those connections and you could see like what you would like to do. I look at so much at Patrick with what he's been doing because there's so much like I want to do, like, okay, I could follow him in these footsteps, he could advise me, and there's a lot of clubs allow you to really create what you want to be in the future. That's the whole point of the clubs, that's the whole point of a lot of different organizations, to create what you want to do in the future. That's my little point.
Nice. So I'm enrolled 4 years in post major. I did not double major, and I'm an Asian studies minor. So I took Chinese. I was the president of the national. I was like, why not get better? To tell a little bit about myself. I was a professional ballet dancer. I'm retired now. My body is happy about that. I also own a school with my brother, a performing arts school for special needs. I also interned with a judge, and I also am a current intern with Fox News. To start off, before I came into Seton Hall, I was like, do I want to go to law school? Maybe, sort of, kind of, maybe, type of thing. I wasn't really sure. So, what's really great about the diplomacy program is they actually give law classes, such as public international law, human rights law, and policy. And the newest one is racism and international law. That's probably not the name, but of course. So after taking all those courses, I'm like, wow, I actually really like law. I can see myself going to law school, pursuing being a lawyer in the future. I can see that happening. So what I decided to do was get an internship with a judge in the civil division in North, in the Essex County. And basically I interned for 2 semesters. Thank you so much, like, please come back. So the first semester is kind of like organization, and you think, oh, that's not a big deal. But actually it was. For a judge going through COVID and having all this chaos going on in the courtroom and all cases, that organization and putting in certain suggestions and getting input was actually super helpful for him. So when I came back the next semester, which is the fall, I started to actually law school student work for him. Right, and I was going through briefs. I also learned what a good lawyer looks like and what a bad lawyer looks like, especially sitting in on those Zoom courtroom cases. So then, also last semester, when I was an intern with the judge, I also was an intern for Fox News. Most of you, everyone, probably sat in front of the TV years 2020 watching the news. And I thought, that'd be pretty cool to be involved in the news. The news and media are a huge part of people's lives, whether you like it or not. So then, let me go see if Fox News has anything. With the tool that Dr. Rubiales talks about, LinkedIn, it's not only good for jobs, finding jobs and internships, but you can stalk people really, really well. And that's creepy. Well, once I went in, because I boxes, stalked her on LinkedIn. She can't actually think she was Seton Hall University. But I'm like, okay, keep track of where she was in her career, so I can ask questions about who she is and what she did and how did she get here. For Fox, I did that Flash team, which is the digital editorial, so I worked on the website. And then I'm more into like TV, so I decided to interview for a producer internship. So I'm right now working on an Emery Murphy show. So I'm working on that. You can see some of the videos and the banners and all that stuff that I've been working on. What is really nice about Fox is I can tell you, Seton Hall alumni are behind your back. They got you. They will always recommend you to the next person out. If they can't help you themselves, Seton Hall alumni will find someone. And I really appreciate that. So right now I'm working on Fox News, great company to work for. So what was really great about the diplomacy school is that requirement of internships. My resume is stacked at this point. I know when I go out of school, when I go into a job, this, that, and the other things. Quite an interesting resume, ballet, special needs school, Fox News judge. So when I go in there, they go, oh wow, she accomplished a lot. She has like great experience. Maybe she doesn't have the experience in this field. We know people like her and they hire her again and again. So I really appreciate everything Dr. Ruby's done. I can't say about her and all the work she'll put in. Whenever she needs to apply for another thing, she's like, send over that cover letter, send over the resume, let's look at it, what can we make it better? Because a cover letter, you're personalizing to your internship or the job position you're going for. So she's got your back. She's going to make sure that it's perfect. She also was talking about the professional development sessions. I was like, oh, it's required. I gotta go on a day that I don't have a class. Oh, best decision of my life. I went to the elevator pitch one. So when I go on these interviews, I have that memorized. I've had it memorized. So when I go on an interview, I just add like little new things. I'm able to speak about myself very calmly and like I'm not stressed about it, like in an interview. But that's really kind of it. You know, the internship program and the career development I can speak about because I ask people in other majors like this, it's like, oh, you know, are you required to do an internship? And I'm very happy that the School of Diplomacy because my resume is not what. My name is Emma Meadows. I'm currently a senior, double majoring in international with a minor in Asian studies. So I took Japanese over Chinese. I'm also from San Francisco, California. So being on the East Coast, I have no family on the East Coast, and the School of Diplomacy, I really do not home because I've actually been my roommate for the past 4 years. So. But my internship currently, I am working at Yemen. I am under the Office of the Director for the Division of Healthcare Management and Occupational Safety and Health. I'm also working on the COVID-19 Task Force program for the Division of Operational Support. So it's a really long title. And I'm very incredibly fortunate to have this opportunity. I actually get to go into the UN for the first time on Monday. I've already gotten info from Dean San Diego about the cafe and other things, and so I'm extremely excited. Important places. Exactly, important places. But my current work, I'm going to be working behind the scenes. I am an administration intern. I've always loved intergovernmental organizations and understanding how they function and how they help the staff that they work with and staff abroad. So obviously the United Nations is the perfect environment for me to do that as a diplomacy student. Ever since I was in your places, I always wanted to work at the UN. So even if I am a senior and you can work for it, it just takes one yes. I'm incredibly fortunate to be in this position. I also had internships at a behavioral and wellness program at a nonprofit in the Bay Area. So my interest in public health has really been fostered fostered over the past couple of years. And what I really love about the diplomacy school, they really help them focus on showing you different things. I've had to take law classes, economics classes, public health classes, and especially with my language, I've been able to understand where I want to go, but also how everything impacts each other. Understanding how culture is important, and that is important to me. I like to focus on culture. So I'm actually taking a class this semester that is new, and it's incredible to see how far we've come since my freshman year by including new classes, more teachers, and especially with the intimate class sizes. I really love being able to talk to a professor, discuss more about one particular topic that is of interest to me, and especially being an Asian American who is white passing. It's very fun to be in an environment where I have teachers where I understand some of my concerns, where I'm able to discuss things. In addition, on campus, I am a part of the story, but most importantly, I am the inclusion committee for the nationals. And so as a diplomacy major, they really encourage me to branch out and become a part of other. So now I'm able to be some part of something bigger myself, and I've had a lot of fun for the past 4 years. I'm really sad that I get to be leaving it, and the adult world is scary. But I'm very proud of what I've accomplished over my past 4 years, and if I could do it over again, I would.
Hello again, everyone. Just a little bit about my internship. Yeah, I think I know my internship. Opportunity for many. And that I was able to meet. Especially in the US. This was incredibly interesting. Previous to this, I had been studying as my language. I took also deciding an internship that I was focused on was happening, even though I was focusing on the I wasn't really during my experience. And I really want to emphasize here kind of what the student is that this is a good representation of the student. It's not just, we're not every single person in the school is very representation of the student. Shows all the student facets, whether it's government. This is really about students. They're getting these opportunities based on love. I personally got my internship from a long foundation. And I reached out, kind of unrelated looking at human rights. Mr. Yemen, my parents are still very confused when I got to that point. So am I, but I'm very proud to have done this because I've never thought about this. Very proud of that, and I'm very proud of these students because it's been very exciting to see everyone evolve as I've been here. You really become very close with everyone around you because it's a very you know each other pretty well. I have a lot of these my classes in diplomacy, but also elsewhere. It's kind of funny because my class, I actually diplomacy in my economics classes, there are diplomacy students like I pointed out. In all my classes, there are diplomacy students, and to be honest, I'm just getting. I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about other students. Wow, these students are really sitting out, and they're bringing everything that they have to the table. This but you learn great about economics, and diplomacy students somehow will relate it to very different things like that. And so I encourage you all to look at this school as an international relations school, but also a school. Because if you really want to be doing that, and like kind of separating yourself from the field, I think you're supposed to be here.
Thank you, thank you. So I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. Students, who have heard this from me, and whatever school you choose to go to, for those of you that are here today, is that success is not by chance. I tell them that all the time, right? So you need to really plan, all right? And then also you need to be vested in your own future. And I think you heard, right, between the lines here, they sought out opportunities. They sought faculty members. They took advantage of it. They took the languages. So they are proof, right, that you can do it, right? Yeah, okay. We, Dean Smith and I, Dr. Ruby, were around if you would like to chat with us. Dr. Edwards, department chair, is in the back as well. If you haven't had lunch, please grab something, and thank you for joining us.